Hi, this is Pat with RacketStringTips.com. Welcome back, and we've completed 2 days at Wimbledon and some action today, of course, around Federer, taking that in 5 sets, and of course an unfortunate end to that, but he gets through to the second round. I was hoping to see how far he can get, and I was watching the interview today, and that was pretty exciting, and of course, what he had to say about his opponent. And he's a very gracious player, and I just always have enjoyed following him through his career. And then of course, unfortunately, it was Serena exiting with her injury and stuff. So anyways, yeah, some good tennis the first couple days, so I wanted to continue with the racket stringing, and today I wanted to talk about on-site stringing. Yesterday, or actually the day before, in my first video talking about stringing and a little bit about what happens at a tournament. So I wanted to go today specifically into what is on-site stringing. You might have heard that term before. Basically, there's a couple ways that, of course, players are going to get their rackets strung when they're at a tournament, professional tournament like Wimbledon. Of course, you have the on-site stringers, and those are the stringers that are paid by the tournament. The group of stringers are paid by the tournament, and they have a designated spot on site, and they are the official stringers for that tournament. And generally it's always behind, well, in a secure area, so the public generally is not going to have access to that. Sometimes, like in Australia, where they would have the room and you wouldn't have access to be able to get in if you were a spectator, but you would be able to see what was going on. You're almost like in a fishbowl, so you'd be standing there stringing, and there'd be the window right next to you, and you'd have all the crowds, everybody standing. It was kind of cool, but then on some ends, it's like when you're really having to concentrate and work, you've got these people just staring at you, and sometimes it gets a little hectic and a little bit weird, but it's fun nonetheless. The crowds love it. Sometimes when you go out to the general public areas and you have your badge on and everything, people think that you're kind of a celebrity sometimes. But anyways, so as far as the on-site stringing, so you have that group. It's usually a team of 12 to 14 stringers in a certain confined space, and they are guaranteed, the players know that there's somebody there that's gonna, they can just take care of, drop off the rackets once they get that all set up, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And so, every tournament is going to have that on-site presence. And then, of course, there's some players who pay a service, a stringing service, or an individual to string for them at certain tournaments. Usually, it might be up to 8 tournaments or 12, depending on what level, what tier this player's in, and what tournaments that they're going to be playing at, so that they can have that consistent string job throughout the tournament, and they don't have to worry about when they go to a tournament, like, okay, are the stringers any good? What kind of machines are they using? Is it consistent? Do I have to add a few pounds or subtract a few pounds to get this accurate? So that way, those players, they pay somebody to go with them. They'll be stringing in a hotel room. They'll always have all the rackets ready. It's just a no-brainer for players. Players like Agassi, Federer's had personal stringers. There's a number of players that will do that. And then, of course, sometimes there'll also be stringers for teams, such as Yonex or possibly other teams as well, where they will have 1 or 2 stringers that will travel to these tournaments, and then anybody who is represented by that team, meaning like Yonex, will be having somebody string the rackets for them, again, probably out of a hotel room and so forth. So there's that. And then, of course, some players who maybe live in the area or have been there or are familiar with a local tennis shop, they might go there. That's a little bit unusual, but you're going to have maybe some lower tier players that might go do that, or even bring their own stringing machine, have their coach string their rackets for them. There's a little bit of that. So anyways, that's kind of how you're going to cover the stringing for all the players at these tournaments. So again, the next thing would be the team. Okay, this is a team effort. I talked about that in my last video. So basically, you have your team. You have, of course, your the folks at the front desk that are going to take in the rackets, okay, and then those, that team will then give that to somebody who will most likely just be responsible for cutting the strings out, for marking down exactly, or for tagging it for the stringer, as far as there'll be a tag that says exactly what the player wants. So when the racket comes in, they'll ask, okay, what are you doing with the racket? Okay, whatever the poundage is, anything specific as far as with knots, string. Sometimes a player might switch. Okay, I'm not going to go with the blend. I'm going to go with this string, or they bring in some new string to try. Their coach might have given them something new to try, or they have representation at that tournament, meaning that if they're sponsored by somebody, they might have gotten some new string from them. So maybe they'll bring that in, and so they'll be very specific. They'll get asked questions as far as tension-wise, anything with the knots, anything else specific with the grip, things like that. And then, of course, they'll have their credit card and everything on file, so that it's not like they pay every time, but they're going to be responsible for paying for that labor. And then usually they'll have a reel, they'll drop that off, they'll put their name on it with a Sharpie, they'll have that on there, and then that will be designated to one of the stringers. And one of those stringers, depending on, you have a kind of a tier of stringers. You're going to have like the head stringer that, of course, is kind of in charge of the team, and then you have some stringers which have more experience, and sometimes they've had experience with certain players that come, and maybe even the player is like, yeah, can I have such and such string my rackets? I know him, I'm familiar with it. And so they'll get assigned certain players. And so, some of the top ranked players will get somebody who's maybe more experienced, and then somebody who's new, because there's usually at these tournaments, they'll get maybe one or two newer stringers, or maybe somebody new came on the team, isn't familiar with the process as much as the seasoned stringers, and so they will then get assigned based on if you're the low person on the totem, you'll get kind of the lower ranked players, and kind of just whatever's out there that comes in, and they'll be equitable as far as equal, as far as giving everybody a certain amount of players. And of course there's always TVs in there where they're watching all the matches, and every day they get a draw sheet to figure out, they'll know who's going to be on court and who's coming up next, and when are the rackets needed, and so forth. So each stringer has to prioritize their own rackets. So when they come in, they're put into a bin, and then they have all the reels of all the players, and then they just go, okay, so who's next? And you'll have 2 or 3, 4 or 5, whatever, of the same racket that you have to do. And so that consistency is very critical right then, because you're going to be knocking these things out, and generally they're going to expect you to be able to string in 20 minutes, 25 minutes a racket, and you've got to keep that consistency, and that it's hard. I mean, you think, oh yeah, 20 minutes, yeah, I can knock out a bunch of rackets in a period of a day. But when you have to stand up 10, 12, sometimes even 14, 16 hours, I mean, that's a little bit more rare, but when you have to stand up that amount of time to be consistent and do this every 20, 25 minutes, I mean, that that's pretty wearing on your body, and so if you have any problems with your back, or your fingers start getting calloused, all that kind of stuff, and if you're pulling poly through rackets time in and time out, that gets to be a little tiresome too. 20 years ago, most of the string jobs had a majority of natural gut, right? Nowadays there's a big component of polyester in there, and so things have kind of changed that direction. So there's some it kind of can at times be more difficult to string that poly. I'd rather string gut all day, actually. And so, okay, so that's kind of the team bringing in the rackets, and so then you have somebody that kind of prepares it all, gets the bags ready, and then gives it to the stringers. And so basically, once the stringer gets it, all he's responsible for is getting that racket done. And then at the end, there'll be somebody. Sometimes sometimes the stringers will stencil the racket. Sometimes there's going to be another person that'll do it, or sometimes the players will say, "Don't stencil, I'll do it." Because some players, have their own specific, they have maybe sponsored by another brand, and they keep that stencil and whatever. So there's that. As far as the environment, like I was saying, it's long days, and generally, if your player is playing that day, you know, and that's somebody that you're stringing for regularly, you're going to be stringing for them for the rest of the time they're at the tournament. You're also going to be responsible for being there, ready for them during the time that they're playing. So, you know, if you're going to take a lunch, things like that, you know, you got to kind of be aware. Okay, are they a player that's going to maybe bring a on-court racket and things like that? So you got to kind of be ready for that. And sometimes, you know, for some of the lower tiered stringers that maybe don't have that much experience, they're maybe not going to do the on-court rackets. And those are those rackets where the player's on-court playing, they broke their strings, or they won a racket that has maybe a little lower tension or higher tension. They'll send one in with the ball boy or somebody, and that racket has to get done like in 10 minutes basically. And so they're going to request, you know, they're going to, and sometimes you work and do this as a team actually. So as soon as the racket comes in, you know, the actual stringer will start getting his string and everything ready, make sure he's got his machine ready. Somebody's be cutting out the strings, just getting those out and getting that racket to him. And it's kind of a cool experience actually, kind of everybody working together to get this done. But you really have to be on your game. You can't make any error. You can't like deviate from anything. It has to be accurate, and you only have 20 minutes. Sometimes the ball person's even standing there waiting for the racket to be sent back out, and it can become stressful. It could definitely become stressful. So those are some of the nuances there. As far as the daily routine, just in general, you know, days usually start at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. Somebody will come in and check all of the calibrations in the machine, because it has to be exact from day to day. And if there's any issue with any of the machines, that's got to be taken care of. You know, you get the draw sheets, check what's happening for the day, see what matches, because usually 10 o'clock seems to be a big time when players like to pick up their rackets. And of course, if weather conditions have changed drastically, meaning there'd been rain the day before or there's rain that morning, then you can expect an influx of rackets, even possibly the same ones that you just strung the day before, because now with all the weather conditions, they're going to want to have them restrung again. So it becomes, things can become backed up. And there's certain days, you know, pretty much already from previous years, there's certain days in the tournament that just brings in more rackets. So you can kind of look historically at, okay, we're going to expect maybe 300 rackets coming in today, or 400, depending on what day it is. And then based on that, you can kind of schedule your day and so forth. And yeah, this goes on throughout the whole tournament. And then of course the stringers, you know, they're from all over the world, so many of them know each other. Some of them might not know each other. They get introduced. You know, everybody has their own personality. For the most part, everybody gets along. Sometimes there's some competitiveness. There's definitely competitiveness, and sometimes some, you know, some feelings can get hurt and so forth. But you know, there's people there that bring the team together, and when they work cohesively as a team, it's, you know, it's a professional environment, and you need to be able to treat it as that. So as far as the players and who brings in the rackets, generally, you know, sometimes you'll see the players bring in the rackets, sometimes it'll be the coach, sometimes it'll be somebody else on the players team. You know, they usually have you know, maybe their hitting partner or whatever will bring in the rackets. But if it's the coach, sometimes they'll, okay, we're going to change something on the racket, we're going to add a few pounds, or you know what, we're going to try this string. Sometimes they won't even tell the players, you know, so I want to have them try this and so forth. So then, you know, you might be changing some things up on the racket. You just got to always be aware. You always got to look. Can't just assume that, oh yeah, this is such and such racket, I'm going to string it at this. You always got to look at specifically on the sheet that you get with the racket as far as the specs and so forth. Yeah, the days are long, and you know, as the tournament goes on, you kind of start, you know, it starts to wear on you. You know, but the experience of just being at those tournaments can be exhilarating and stuff. So those are some things I wanted to highlight, and that's, you know, just kind of a general for a lot of the tournaments. And of course, with Wimbledon, there'll be some real specific things. I think there's a few videos out, and so I'll kind of mention that in some of my next videos as well. And we'll go ahead and keep finding all the good stuff. So I hope that was informative for you. I know it went a little bit long today, but we'll see how round 2 goes, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for checking us out.